Have you ever noticed that the people who seem the hardest to forget are usually the ones who never tried to make anyone like them? They don't chase attention. They don't beg for approval. They don't seem desperate to be chosen. And yet, wherever they go, people naturally notice them. What if I told you that ancient Stoic philosophers believed this kind of presence could be explained with just 6 simple words? Not a dating trick, not manipulation, not a psychological hack. Just 6 words that have survived for nearly 2,000 years because they reveal something timeless about human nature. Those words are, I choose you. I need nothing. At first, they almost sound contradictory. How can you choose someone deeply while needing nothing from them? That question holds one of the greatest lessons Stoicism has to offer. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these 6 words quietly transform the way people experience you. You'll learn why they remove anxiety from relationships, why they create genuine confidence instead of fake confidence, and why the most respected people often live by this principle without ever realizing it. This isn't about becoming emotionally distant. It's not about pretending you don't care. Stoicism never teaches us to stop loving people. It teaches us something much more powerful: to love without becoming dependent, to care without losing yourself, to choose without trying to control. That's where real confidence begins. Welcome to Stoicism Mind Theory. If you're someone who wants to build emotional strength, master your mind, and apply timeless Stoic wisdom to modern life, you're in exactly the right place. Every week, we explore the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, not as history lessons, but as practical tools you can use in your relationships, your career, and your everyday life. If that journey speaks to you, subscribe and let's begin. Because today's lesson might completely change the way you see yourself and the way everyone else experiences your presence. Let's start with a truth that most people spend years avoiding. Almost every person who has ever felt ignored, unwanted, or afraid of being abandoned wasn't simply hoping for another person's affection. They believed they needed it. And that single belief changes everything. There's a huge difference between wanting something and believing you cannot be happy without it. Most people never recognize that difference. They treat both feelings as if they were the same, but they couldn't be more different. Wanting comes from freedom. Needing comes from dependence. Wanting says, I would love for this to happen. Needing says, I can't be okay unless it does. The moment desire becomes dependency, people can feel it. Not because they consciously analyze it, but because human beings naturally sense emotional pressure. Have you ever met someone who tried just a little too hard to impress everyone? Maybe they laughed at every joke, agreed with every opinion, answered every message within seconds, constantly searched for reassurance that you still liked them. They probably meant well, but if you're honest, you may have also felt the urge to step back. Not because they were bad people, but because their happiness quietly seemed to depend on your approval. That responsibility feels heavier than most people realize. Now think about the opposite kind of person. Someone who listens more than they speak. Someone who's comfortable with silence instead of rushing to fill every quiet moment. Someone who can respectfully disagree without becoming defensive. Someone who doesn't need everyone to agree with them in order to feel secure. They aren't trying to impress anyone. Yet somehow, you often find yourself wanting to earn their respect. Why? Because calm confidence has a quiet kind of gravity. People naturally move toward those who are already comfortable within themselves. This isn't some strange trick of psychology, and it's certainly not a game. It's simply part of human nature. Long before psychologists spoke about anxious attachment or approval seeking, the Stoics had already discovered the same pattern. One man understood it better than almost anyone: Epictetus. Born into slavery, he eventually became one of history's greatest philosophers. His life taught him a lesson that many people spend decades trying to learn. He believed our suffering doesn't come directly from events. It comes from believing we need certain outcomes in order to be okay. The moment you convince yourself that another person's love, attention, or approval is necessary for your happiness, you unknowingly place your emotional life in their hands. Without realizing it, you hand someone else the keys to your peace of mind. And people often feel that invisible weight. Instead of feeling honored, they feel pressured. No one wants the responsibility of becoming another person's entire source of happiness. That's why neediness often pushes people away. Not because society says it should, but because it quietly communicates, "I'm incomplete, and I'm hoping you'll complete me." Deep down, very few people want that role. People don't dream of becoming someone else's missing piece. They want to be chosen by someone who already feels whole. And that's exactly what those 6 words represent. I choose you. I need nothing. The first half expresses genuine desire. The second half protects your freedom. Together, they create one of the healthiest mindsets you can bring into any relationship. Before we continue, I'd like you to answer one simple question. When it comes to relationships, are you usually a wanter or a needer? Be completely honest with yourself. Your answer may reveal far more than you expect. At the center of Stoic philosophy lies one of its most powerful ideas, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus began his famous handbook by dividing life into only 2 categories: things we control and things we don't. Our thoughts, our choices, our actions, our effort. These belong to us. But other people's feelings, their opinions, their decisions, and their hearts never do, no matter how much we wish they did. This truth becomes especially important in relationships. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot control whether they reply, whether they stay, or whether they recognize your value. You can be kind, honest, patient, loyal, generous, authentic, but another person's heart will always remain their own. Most people spend years fighting this reality. Stoicism teaches us something different. Stop trying to control another person's choice. Start becoming responsible for your own, because that's where real freedom begins. Now let's go one step deeper. Understanding that you can't control another person's choices is one thing. Actually living that truth is something else entirely. Most people accept it intellectually. Very few practice it emotionally. Think about how often we try to control things that were never ours to control. We replay conversations. We overanalyze text messages. We search for hidden meanings in someone's silence. We carefully choose our words, hoping they'll create the perfect reaction. Without realizing it, we spend enormous amounts of energy trying to influence another person's heart. But hearts don't respond to pressure. They respond to freedom. This is where the Stoics offer one of the most liberating ideas you'll ever hear. If another person's feelings are outside your control, then your peace should never depend on them. Read that again in your mind. If you cannot control someone's affection, you also don't have to build your happiness around receiving it. That's not a loss. It's freedom. Because once your happiness no longer depends on someone else's response, something extraordinary happens. You stop performing. You stop trying to become the version of yourself you think everyone else wants. You stop editing your personality just to avoid rejection. Instead, you simply become yourself. And surprisingly, that's the version people trust the most. This is the real meaning behind those 6 words. I choose you. I need nothing. The first sentence belongs to you. It represents your decision, your values, your willingness to care, your courage to show up honestly. The second sentence lets go of everything that belongs to the other person, their response, their opinion, their feelings, their decision. Once you separate those 2 worlds, anxiety begins to lose its grip. You stop checking your phone every few minutes. You stop wondering if one delayed reply means the relationship is over. You stop exhausting yourself trying to predict what someone else is thinking. Instead, you become fully present. And presence is far more powerful than perfection. People don't remember perfect conversations. They remember how calm they felt around you. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than almost anyone. Despite ruling one of the greatest empires in history, he constantly reminded himself that real peace could never come from public praise. Every day, thousands of people admired him. Thousands criticized him. Thousands expected something from him. If he had allowed every opinion to shape his identity, he would have lived in constant emotional chaos. Instead, he returned to the same lesson again and again. Your mind belongs to you. Protect it. guide it. Don't rent it out to the changing opinions of the crowd. Think about that for a moment. If one of the most powerful men in history couldn't control what people thought about him, why do we believe we should be able to? How much of your life has been spent trying to manage impressions instead of building character? How many decisions were made because you genuinely believed they were right, and how many were made because you hoped someone else would approve? These questions aren't meant to make you feel guilty. They're meant to wake you up. Because the truth is simple. The more desperately we chase approval, the more we communicate that we don't yet approve of ourselves. And people notice that. Not consciously, not logically, but emotionally. Human beings are incredibly sensitive to emotional energy. Confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. People feel it, just as they feel insecurity. That's why the very thing so many people chase, being admired, often arrives only after they stop chasing it. Not because desire is wrong, but because desperation quietly reveals fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. Stoicism doesn't ask you to stop wanting love. It asks you to remove fear from love, to care deeply without becoming dependent, to give freely without demanding certainty in return. That is emotional freedom. And emotional freedom is one of the rarest forms of strength in today's world. So ask yourself one simple question. The next time you're waiting for someone's reply, the next time you feel anxious because another person seems distant, the next time you catch yourself searching for reassurance, pause. Take one slow breath and quietly ask yourself, am I trying to control something that was never mine to control? That single question has the power to interrupt years of unconscious habits. Because every moment you choose peace over panic, presence over performance, and character over approval, you become a little more like the person the Stoics believed we were capable of becoming. Strong, steady, free, and quietly unforgettable. Now let's slow down and focus on the first half of those 6 words. I choose you. At first glance, those words seem simple, almost ordinary, but hidden inside them is one of the most powerful shifts you can make in the way you approach every relationship. Notice the word choose, not need, not can't live without, not I hope you'll complete me, just choose. That single word changes everything. Because choosing comes from freedom, needing comes from fear. A choice can only exist when you already believe your life has value, with or without the outcome. Imagine walking through a beautiful garden. Hundreds of flowers surround you. Each one has its own color, its own fragrance, its own beauty. You stop in front of one flower, not because it's the only flower that exists, but because something about it genuinely speaks to you. That's what healthy love looks like. Not searching for someone to rescue you, but recognizing someone you sincerely wish to walk beside. There's a world of difference between saying, I choose to share my life with you, and silently thinking, I need you to make my life meaningful. One is built on abundance. The other grows from scarcity. People may never hear those thoughts, but they often feel the difference. That's why authentic confidence rarely needs an explanation. It reveals itself through your actions, your patience, your consistency, your ability to remain calm even when life becomes uncertain. This was something Seneca understood deeply. He often reminded his students that the greatest gifts are those given freely. The moment generosity becomes a transaction, it loses its beauty. Think about that for a moment. Imagine giving someone a gift. One gift says, I saw this and thought of you. The other silently says, I hope this makes you like me more. Both gifts may look identical, but emotionally, they couldn't be more different. Relationships work exactly the same way. When you offer your attention simply because you enjoy someone's company, your presence feels light, natural, comfortable. But when every conversation secretly carries the hope of receiving reassurance, validation, or proof that you're enough, the emotional atmosphere changes. Without meaning to, you place invisible pressure on the other person. and pressure rarely creates genuine connection. Freedom does. That's why "I choose you" is such a powerful sentence. It says, "I'm here because I genuinely value who you are, not because my happiness depends on keeping you." Those are two completely different forms of love. One asks for ownership. The other offers appreciation. The Stoics believed that every human being should enter relationships as a complete individual. Not perfect, not without flaws, but grounded, emotionally responsible, capable of standing on their own feet. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every person enters our lives for a season that we cannot fully control. Some remain for decades. Others leave much sooner than we hoped. Trying to possess what was never ours to own only creates suffering. Instead, appreciate what exists while it exists. That simple shift changes everything. When you're no longer trying to control the future, you finally become present in the moment. You listen more carefully. You laugh more naturally. You stop rehearsing your next sentence while the other person is still speaking. You stop trying to become impressive and start becoming authentic. Ironically, that's when people often feel closest to you, because authenticity creates safety, and safety creates trust. Ask yourself something honestly. When have you felt most connected to another person? Was it when they were trying desperately to impress you? Or was it when they were simply comfortable being themselves? Most of us already know the answer. Real connection doesn't grow from performance. It grows from presence. This is why Stoicism never teaches emotional distance. It teaches emotional honesty. To love without clinging. To care without controlling. To choose wholeheartedly, while accepting that every human being remains free to choose for themselves. That isn't weakness. It's one of the strongest forms of love a person can offer. Because love without freedom isn't love. It's attachment. And attachment built on fear can never create lasting peace. So the next time you care deeply about someone, remember the first half of these 6 words. Not as a phrase to repeat, but as a way of living. I choose you. Not because I need you to complete me, not because I'm afraid of being alone, but because, from a place of inner strength, I freely choose to share this moment, this journey, and this life with you. Now let's turn to the second half of the sentence, the part that often makes people uncomfortable. I need nothing. At first, those words can sound cold, almost emotionless. Some people hear them and imagine someone who doesn't care about anyone, someone who keeps people at a distance, someone who refuses to love. But that's not what the Stoics meant, not even close. I need nothing doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop depending. There is an enormous difference between those two ideas. Love opens the heart. Dependence chains it. When your happiness depends entirely on another person's choices, you're no longer loving freely. You're negotiating with fear. Every message becomes a test. Every silence becomes a threat. Every disagreement feels like the beginning of the end. Life becomes exhausting because your emotional state rises and falls with someone else's decisions. The Stoics wanted to free us from that invisible prison, not by removing love, but by removing fear from love. Think about someone standing on solid ground. Now imagine another person trying to stand while leaning completely against them. The first person can move naturally. The second loses balance the moment the support disappears. Many relationships quietly work this way. People don't realize they're asking someone else to carry the weight of their emotional stability. But no one can do that forever. Sooner or later, the pressure becomes too heavy. This is why emotional independence is not selfish. It's an act of respect. Respect for yourself, and respect for the people you love. Because when you no longer expect another person to complete you, they're finally free to simply be themselves. Seneca understood this better than almost anyone. He often encouraged people to examine every powerful desire honestly. Whenever something seemed absolutely necessary for happiness, he believed it deserved closer inspection. Was it truly necessary? Or had the mind simply convinced itself that it was? That question still matters today. Think about the last time you couldn't stop checking your phone. Maybe you were waiting for a reply. Maybe you were hoping someone would finally notice you. Maybe your entire mood depended on a single notification. The phone wasn't creating the anxiety. The attachment was. Your mind had connected one message with your entire sense of peace. That's a heavy burden for a simple conversation to carry. The same thing happens in relationships. Sometimes we don't actually miss the person. We miss the certainty they gave us. We miss the reassurance. We miss the feeling of being chosen. Stoicism asks us to separate those things. Instead of asking, "Why aren't they making me feel secure?" ask, "Why have I placed my security outside myself?" That one question changes everything, because it shifts your attention back to the only place where lasting peace can be built: within. This doesn't mean you stop feeling sadness. If someone leaves your life, it will hurt. If someone you love disappoints you, you'll feel the pain. The Stoics never believed emotion should be denied. Marcus Aurelius grieved. Seneca grieved. Epictetus experienced loss. They weren't emotionless. They were emotionally disciplined. They allowed themselves to feel pain without allowing pain to become their identity. That's an important difference. Being strong doesn't mean never breaking. It means knowing how to rebuild. It means trusting that your character survives even when your circumstances change. This is closely connected to a Stoic idea that is often misunderstood. The Greeks called it apatheia. Many people translate that word as apathy, but that's not what it means. It doesn't describe someone who feels nothing. It describes someone who refuses to become a prisoner of destructive emotions. A person living with apatheia can love deeply, care deeply, celebrate deeply, even grieve deeply. But none of those emotions are allowed to take control of their judgment. They remain the captain of their own mind. Imagine the ocean during a storm. The waves become violent. The wind pushes in every direction. Now, imagine a lighthouse standing firmly on the shore. The storm doesn't disappear. The lighthouse simply refuses to move. That is emotional freedom. Life will continue bringing praise and criticism, success and failure, love and heartbreak. People will arrive. People will leave. None of that can be completely controlled. But your character can remain steady through all of it. And that quiet stability changes the energy you bring into every relationship. People stop feeling responsible for keeping you emotionally afloat. Instead, they experience something much healthier. A person who genuinely enjoys their presence, without demanding it. Someone who says, "I'm grateful you're here," instead of, "I don't know who I am without you." Can you feel the difference? One creates freedom. The other creates pressure. One invites connection. The other silently asks for rescue. The Stoics believed that love is strongest when both people are standing on their own feet. Not because they don't need support from one another, but because neither person expects the other to become the foundation of their identity. That's the deeper meaning behind these words. I need nothing. Not because life has nothing left to offer me. Not because I don't value love. Not because I want to live alone. But because my peace, my dignity, and my sense of worth were never meant to depend on another person's decision. When you truly understand that, you stop chasing. You stop clinging. You stop fearing every possible ending. And for the first time, you become free to love someone completely, without losing yourself in the process. So far, we've explored the philosophy. Now let's meet the man who lived it. Not in comfort, not in luxury, but under circumstances that would have broken most people. His name was Epictetus. And if anyone had a reason to believe that happiness depended on external circumstances, it was him. He was born into slavery. From the very beginning of his life, almost everything was controlled by someone else. His time wasn't his own. His work wasn't his own. Even his body belonged to another person. Most people would have concluded that freedom was impossible. But Epictetus reached a completely different conclusion. He discovered that there was one place no master could ever enter: the human mind. That realization changed everything. While others searched for freedom in money, status, or power, Epictetus searched for freedom within himself. He taught that the greatest prison is not made of iron bars. It's made of false beliefs. The belief that someone else must approve of you before you can value yourself. The belief that success alone can make you enough. The belief that another person's love is required before you deserve peace. Those invisible beliefs imprison far more people than chains ever could, and most never realize they're carrying them. Imagine waking up every morning believing your mood depends on another person's opinion. Imagine allowing one text message, one compliment, or one rejection to decide whether today will be a good day. That isn't freedom. That's emotional captivity. Epictetus refused to live that way. He reminded his students again and again, no one can control your mind unless you hand it over. Think about the power hidden inside that idea. Someone may criticize you. Someone may misunderstand you. Someone may even walk away from your life. But none of those events automatically decide who you are. Only your own judgment has that authority. That's where real confidence begins. Not when the world finally accepts you, but when you stop waiting for the world to decide your value. Years later, after gaining his freedom, Epictetus became one of Rome's most respected teachers. Politicians came to hear him. Military leaders sought his advice. Wealthy citizens sat among ordinary people, all hoping to understand the peace this former slave possessed. Isn't that remarkable? The man who once owned almost nothing eventually possessed something emperors couldn't buy: inner freedom. People trusted him, not because he tried to impress them, not because he chased admiration, but because he had nothing to prove. And that's a lesson every one of us can learn. Many people believe attraction comes from saying the perfect words, looking a certain way, owning expensive things, or appearing successful. Those things may attract attention, but attention and respect are not the same thing. Respect grows from something much deeper. It grows from emotional stability, from integrity, from consistency, from knowing who you are even when life becomes uncertain. Think about the people you admire most. Are they constantly asking others for reassurance? Do they change their personality to fit every room they enter? Probably not. They remain themselves, whether people applaud them, criticize them, or ignore them completely. That quiet consistency creates trust, and trust creates genuine influence. Epictetus understood that influence is never something you chase. It's something you earn by mastering yourself first. He often encouraged his students to ask one simple question whenever life became difficult. Is this within my control? It sounds almost too simple. Yet that question has the power to transform your entire life. Someone insults you. Can you control their words? No. Can you control your response? Absolutely. Someone rejects you. Can you force them to change their mind? No. Can you choose to keep your dignity? Always. Someone refuses to recognize your worth. Can you make them see it? No. Can you continue living according to your values anyway? Yes. And that's exactly where your power lives. Not in controlling other people, but in mastering yourself. Imagine how much lighter life becomes when you stop carrying responsibilities that never belong to you. Imagine how much energy returns when you stop trying to manage everyone's opinion. Imagine how much peace appears when you realize your worth has never been decided by another human being. This is the transformation Stoicism offers. It doesn't promise a life without rejection. It promises a life where rejection no longer destroys you. It doesn't promise everyone will choose you. It teaches you how to remain whole even when they don't. And ironically, that's often the moment people begin to see something different about you. Not because you've become louder, but because you become quieter. Not because you've learned how to demand attention, but because you've stopped needing it. That is the quiet magnetism Epictetus embodied. A presence built not on pride, but on freedom. Not on perfection, but on peace. And once you experience that kind of inner freedom, you'll never want to trade it for approval again. Now let's look at someone whose life seemed completely different from that of Epictetus. One man was born into slavery, The other ruled the most powerful empire on earth. Yet despite their vastly different lives, they arrived at exactly the same truth. His name was Marcus Aurelius. History remembers him as the Emperor of Rome, but the Stoics remember him for something far greater, a man who never allowed power to replace character. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that millions of lives depend on your decisions. Armies await your command. Politicians compete for your favor. Citizens praise you one day and criticize you the next. Every conversation has a hidden agenda. Every compliment may be designed to gain influence. Every smile might conceal ambition. That was Marcus Aurelius's reality. Most people believe unlimited power would bring unlimited peace. Marcus discovered the opposite. The higher you rise, the louder the opinions become. The more authority you gain, the more impossible it becomes to satisfy everyone. He understood something that many of us spend our entire lives forgetting. If your happiness depends on keeping everyone pleased, you'll never know peace. That's why, in his private journal, what we now know as meditations, Marcus constantly reminded himself to return his attention inward. Those pages were never meant for the public. They weren't speeches. They weren't books written to inspire millions. They were private conversations with himself. And perhaps that's what makes them so powerful. Again and again, he reminded himself that public praise is temporary. So is criticism. Neither one has the authority to define who you are. Think about that. One day people celebrate you. The next day they question your every decision. If you build your identity on applause, you'll lose yourself the moment the applause disappears. Marcus refused to let that happen. He measured his life by one standard alone: his own character. Not popularity, not reputation, not public opinion. Character. That single decision gave him something few leaders ever possess: inner stability. And people noticed it. Not because he demanded respect, but because he lived in a way that naturally inspired it. This reveals something fascinating about human nature. People don't trust those who constantly seek approval. They trust those who remain true to their principles, even when approval disappears. Think about the people you admire most. Maybe it's a mentor, a teacher, a parent, or someone you've never even met. What makes them unforgettable? Usually, it's not their confidence in front of a crowd. It's their consistency when no one is watching. They don't become a different person depending on who's in the room. Their values remain steady. Their words match their actions. Their decisions come from conviction rather than fear. That quiet consistency creates trust, and trust is far more powerful than popularity. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. He never tried to control how history would remember him. He simply focused on becoming the kind of man his own conscience could respect. That's a lesson every one of us can apply. Instead of asking, "How do I make people admire me?" try asking, "Am I living in a way that I can genuinely admire myself?" Notice how different those questions feel. The first gives your power away. The second brings it home. One depends on other people. The other depends on your own choices. And that's exactly where Stoicism wants your attention to stay. Imagine two people walking into the same room. The first spends every moment wondering, do they like me? Am I saying the right thing? What if I make a bad impression? The second person walks in with a completely different mindset. How can I listen well? How can I contribute honestly? How can I stay true to who I am? Which person seems calmer? Which one feels more confident? Which one would you naturally want to spend time with? The answer is almost always the second. Not because they're trying harder, but because they're trying less. They're no longer chasing approval. They're expressing character. That's the difference. Marcus Aurelius believed that every human being has a role to play in life. Your responsibility is not to impress the audience. Your responsibility is to perform your role with integrity. The audience will always change. Opinions will always change. Circumstances will always change. But character can remain constant. And once your character becomes stronger than your desire for approval, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop comparing yourself to everyone around you. You stop competing for attention. You stop living according to expectations that were never truly yours. Instead, you begin living according to principles. And principles create a kind of confidence that cannot be taken away. This is why Marcus Aurelius continues to inspire millions of people nearly 2,000 years later. Not because he ruled an empire. Empires eventually disappear. Not because he held power. Power eventually fades. But because he proved that the strongest person in any room is rarely the loudest. It's the one who has learned to govern their own mind before trying to influence anyone else. That's the heart of Stoic leadership. Master yourself first. Everything else comes second. And when people meet someone who no longer needs applause to feel valuable, they don't just notice them, they remember them. Because true influence has never come from demanding attention. It comes from becoming someone whose presence quietly speaks for itself. We've explored the wisdom of Epictetus. We've learned from the example of Marcus Aurelius. Now it's time to hear the voice of the third great Stoic teacher, a man who understood one of the greatest traps of the human mind long before modern psychology gave it a name. His name was Seneca. He was a philosopher, a statesman, a writer, and someone who spent much of his life observing the invisible forces that quietly shape human behavior. Seneca noticed something remarkable. Most people don't suffer because they have too little. They suffer because they believe they can never have enough. Enough success, enough recognition, enough money, enough certainty, enough love. The human mind has an incredible ability to transform simple desires into emotional necessities. And once that happens, peace disappears. Think about it. Wanting a loving relationship is perfectly natural. Wanting meaningful friendships is healthy. Wanting to succeed in your career is nothing to be ashamed of. The Stoics never argued against desire. They argued against becoming controlled by it. There's a difference. A desire can inspire you. An attachment can imprison you. And that difference changes everything. Imagine holding a bird in your hands. If your grip is gentle, the bird feels safe. It may even choose to stay. But if you squeeze too tightly because you're terrified it might fly away, you become the very reason it leaves. Many people approach relationships in exactly that way. The more afraid they become of losing someone, the tighter they hold. The tighter they hold, the less freedom the relationship has to breathe. Seneca believed this pattern existed far beyond romance. It appears in friendships, families, careers, even our relationship with success itself. Whenever fear enters desire, peace quietly leaves. That's why he encouraged people to question every powerful craving. Whenever your mind tells you, I absolutely need this to be happy, pause and ask yourself, is that really true? Or, has my imagination turned a preference into a necessity? That single question can dissolve years of unnecessary suffering. Let's make it practical. Imagine you're waiting for an important reply. Every few minutes, you unlock your phone. Nothing. 5 minutes later, you check again. Still nothing. Soon, your mind begins creating stories. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I should send another message. Notice what happened. The silence didn't create the anxiety. Your interpretation did. The mind filled empty space with fearful assumptions. Stoicism teaches us to interrupt that pattern. Instead of reacting immediately, become curious. Ask yourself, what do I actually know? Usually, the honest answer is very little. Everything else is imagination. And imagination fueled by fear is one of the greatest creators of unnecessary pain. Seneca warned against this thousands of years ago, not because he wanted people to become emotionally distant, but because he wanted them to become emotionally free. Freedom begins the moment you stop treating assumptions as facts. Now think about another moment in your own life, a time when you worked hard towards something important, but didn't obsess over the outcome. Maybe it was an interview, a project, a conversation, or even a relationship. You gave your best effort, then you let life unfold. Remember how different that felt? There was focus, there was care, but there wasn't panic. That calm state is exactly what the Stoics wanted us to cultivate. Not because it guarantees success, but because it protects your peace regardless of the outcome. Seneca often reminded his students that fortune is unpredictable. Life changes quickly. People change. Circumstances change. Nothing external remains permanent. If your happiness depends entirely on things that constantly change, your happiness will constantly change too. That's why Stoicism builds life from the inside out. Your values, your discipline, your integrity, your character. These become your foundation. Everything else becomes a welcome addition, not a requirement for your well-being. This brings us back to those 6 simple words. I choose you. I need nothing. Notice what they don't say. They don't say, I don't care about you. They don't say, I don't want love. They don't say, I'll never feel pain. Instead, they say something much wiser. I choose this connection with my whole heart, but I refuse to place the weight of my identity on your shoulders. That is mature love. That is emotional strength. That is freedom. Because when another person no longer feels responsible for keeping you emotionally alive, they're finally free to know the real you. Not the anxious version trying to earn approval. Not the fearful version trying to avoid rejection, but the authentic version. The one who gives love without bargaining. The one who offers kindness without expecting repayment. The one who remains grateful, whether life says yes or no. That kind of presence is rare, and rare things are always remembered. This is why Stoicism isn't just a philosophy of resilience, it's a philosophy of relationships. It teaches you how to care deeply without clinging, how to love fully without losing yourself, and how to become the kind of person whose greatest source of security has never depended on another person's permission. Now that we've explored the philosophy behind these 6 words, there's one question left. How do you actually live them? Understanding an idea is easy. Living it every single day is where real transformation begins. The Stoics believed philosophy should never remain trapped inside books. If an idea doesn't change the way you think, the way you respond, or the way you live, then it's simply information. Wisdom only begins when knowledge becomes action. So let me leave you with 5 simple Stoic practices you can begin today. These aren't complicated. You don't need expensive courses. You don't need perfect discipline. You simply need consistency. Practice 1. Build a life that doesn't depend on one person. One of the greatest mistakes people make is allowing a single relationship to become the center of their entire identity. Their happiness rises and falls with one person's attention. Their confidence depends on one person's opinion. Their future revolves around one person's choices. That is far too much responsibility to place on another human being. Instead, create a life that continues growing regardless of who enters or leaves it. Develop skills. Read books. Take care of your health. Strengthen your friendships. Pursue meaningful work. Spend time with family. Learn something new. When your identity has many strong roots, one disappointment can no longer uproot your entire life. Marcus Aurelius remained devoted to learning, duty, and self-improvement every single day. His purpose never depended on one relationship. Neither should yours. Practice 2. Pause before reacting. This may be the simplest habit in this entire video, but it might also be the most powerful. The next time someone doesn't reply immediately, pause. The next time someone criticizes you, pause. The next time fear tells you to send another message, pause. That small space between an event and your reaction is where freedom begins. Epictetus taught that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we can always choose how we respond. Most emotional suffering comes from reacting too quickly. A calm pause often prevents hours of unnecessary anxiety. Sometimes the strongest response is no immediate response at all. Practice 3. Separate your effort from the outcome. Before an important conversation, before a first date, before a job interview, before pressing send on an important message, quietly remind yourself, my responsibility is to give my best. The outcome belongs to life. Those words instantly remove unnecessary pressure. You stop trying to control the future. Instead, you focus completely on the present. people can feel that difference. Presence always creates a stronger impression than perfection. Practice 4. Question your attachments. Whenever your mind says, "I can't be happy unless this happens," stop. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, is this truly a necessity, or is it simply a strong desire? Most of the time, you'll discover that your fear has exaggerated the situation. You don't actually need certainty. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need everyone's approval. What you truly need is a stronger relationship with yourself. Once that relationship becomes solid, every other relationship becomes healthier. Practice 5. Learn to enjoy your own company. This may be the hardest practice of all. Spend time alone without immediately reaching for your phone. Go for a walk. Read. Write. Reflect. Sit quietly with your own thoughts. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. That's normal. But eventually, something beautiful begins to happen. Silence stops feeling empty. It begins to feel peaceful. And when you've learned to enjoy your own company, you stop asking other people to rescue you from loneliness. Instead, you invite them into a life that's already full. That's exactly what emotional maturity looks like. The person who is comfortable alone is also the person who can love most freely. Because they aren't loving from fear, they're loving from abundance. Now imagine living this way for 1 year. Imagine no longer checking your phone every few minutes, no longer overthinking every conversation, no longer measuring your worth by someone else's attention. Imagine walking into every room with quiet confidence because your value is no longer up for debate. That is the life the Stoics wanted for you. Not a life without love, not a life without emotion, but a life where your peace remains stronger than your circumstances. And that's what those 6 words truly mean. I choose you. I need nothing. One sentence teaches love, the other teaches freedom. Together, they teach a way of living that very few people ever discover. So the next time life tests your patience, the next time rejection knocks at your door, the next time fear whispers that you aren't enough, remember these 6 words, not as a quote, not as a slogan, but as a daily practice. Choose deeply, love sincerely, give generously, stand firmly, and never place your peace in someone else's hands. Because the strongest, calmest, and most unforgettable people aren't the ones who are chosen by everyone. They're the ones who have already chosen themselves. If today's message spoke to you, let me know in the comments. Which part challenged you the most? I choose you, or I need nothing. I genuinely love to hear your thoughts. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to Stoicism Mind Theory, and share this message with someone who may need it today. Until next time, protect your peace, master your mind, and walk through life with the quiet strength of a true Stoic. Before you leave, I want to share one final thought. Not as a philosopher, not as a teacher, but simply as one human being speaking to another. One day, years from now, you won't remember every message you sent. You won't remember every conversation that kept you awake at night. You won't remember every moment you worried about whether someone liked you enough. But you will remember the person you became through those experiences. And that's what Stoicism has always been about. Not controlling life. Becoming the kind of person who remains steady no matter what life brings. Because the truth is, people will misunderstand you. Some will leave. Some promises will be broken. Some dreams won't unfold the way you hoped. No philosophy can prevent those moments. Not even Stoicism. But Stoicism can make sure those moments never destroy who you are. That is its greatest gift. It reminds you that your peace was never meant to be borrowed from someone else's opinion. Your confidence was never meant to depend on applause. Your worth was never meant to rise and fall with another person's decision. Everything you've been searching for, respect, confidence, security, love, begins with the relationship you build with yourself. When you become someone you genuinely respect, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing validation. You stop competing for attention. You stop measuring your life against everyone else's. Instead, you begin living from your values. And values create a kind of confidence that no rejection can take away. Remember Epictetus, a man who owned almost nothing. yet possessed complete inner freedom. Remember Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by power, who still believed mastering his own mind was life's greatest achievement. Remember Seneca, a man who reminded us that the heaviest chains are often the invisible ones created by fear, attachment, and endless desire. 3 different lives, 3 different paths, 1 timeless truth. Your greatest victory will never be over another person. It will always be over yourself. Every day, you have a choice. You can wake up seeking approval or seeking growth. You can spend your energy trying to control other people or mastering your own thoughts. You can live in fear of rejection or with the quiet confidence that your value has never depended on being chosen. That choice belongs to you, every single day. So tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you wonder what someone else thinks, before the world begins demanding your attention, take 1 slow breath. Look yourself in the mirror and quietly remind yourself of these 6 words. I choose you. I need nothing. Not because you reject love, not because you reject connection, but because you finally learned the difference between love and dependence, between confidence and performance, between peace and approval. Carry those words into your relationships. Carry them into your career. Carry them into every difficult conversation you'll ever face. And over time, they will stop being words. They will become your character. They will become your presence. They will become the quiet strength people notice before you ever speak. Because the most magnetic people in the world aren't those who demand attention. They're the ones who no longer need it. If this video helped you see yourself differently, don't let the lesson end here. Take 1 idea from today's video and practice it this week. Not all 5, just 1. Small daily actions create lasting transformation. And if this message brought you value, help it reach someone else who may need these words today. Like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to Stoicism Mind Theory, where every week we explore timeless Stoic wisdom and turn it into practical guidance for modern life. Thank you for spending these moments with me. Until we meet again, guard your peace, protect your character, choose with intention, need nothing that can take away your freedom, and keep walking your path with the calm, steady heart of a true Stoic. Because in the end, the greatest relationship you will ever build is the one you have with yourself. Before we end, I'd like to leave you with 1 final reflection. Close your eyes for just a moment and imagine yourself 1 year from today. Imagine waking up each morning without the constant need to check whether someone has replied. Imagine walking into every room without wondering if you're good enough. Imagine making decisions because they align with your values, not because you're afraid of disappointing someone else. Imagine loving people deeply while never losing yourself in the process. That version of you isn't a fantasy. It's built 1 decision at a time. Every moment you choose peace over panic. Every moment you choose character over approval. Every moment you choose discipline over emotion. You become that person. This is why Stoicism has survived for more than 2,000 years. Not because it promises an easy life, but because it teaches us how to remain steady in an unpredictable one. The world around you will continue to change. People will come and go. Some dreams will come true. Others won't. You'll experience success. You'll experience failure. You'll be praised. You'll be criticized. None of those experiences can be completely avoided, but they also don't have to define you. Because your greatest strength has never come from controlling the world around you. It comes from mastering the world within you. That's the lesson Epictetus discovered in slavery. That's the lesson Marcus Aurelius practiced while leading an empire. That's the lesson Seneca repeated throughout his life. And today, that same lesson is available to you. Remember these 6 words whenever life becomes uncertain, whenever fear begins whispering that you aren't enough, whenever rejection makes you question your worth, whenever anxiety tells you to chase what was never yours to control. Pause, take 1 slow breath, and quietly remind yourself, I choose you. Because I choose to live with honesty, I choose to live with courage. I choose to live according to my values. I need nothing, because my peace is an inside job. My worth isn't waiting for someone else's approval. My confidence doesn't depend on applause, and my happiness cannot be taken away by another person's decision. These 6 words are more than a philosophy. They're a way of living, a way of loving, a way of leading, and ultimately, a way of becoming free. So as you leave this video today, don't just remember the words, practice them, live them. Allow them to shape the way you think, the way you speak, and the way you walk through life. One day, you'll look back and realize something extraordinary. The person you were desperately trying to become was created the moment you stopped chasing approval and started building yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this message inspired you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Stoicism Mind Theory, and share it with someone who may need these words today. Until next time, stay calm, stay disciplined, protect your peace, master your mind, and remember, the strongest people are not those who control others. They are the ones who have learned to master themselves. I'll see you in the next video.